One, start.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our employer-centric webinar. And it's a great pleasure to restart these. If I may start with an apology, both to Mike Jolley, our presenter today, and to you for the short notice. But thanks to Shuang and one or two others at Abertay University, we are up and running. This is being recorded, so if you have to jump off, and obviously for those who can't join, we will put this up on both the Abertay site and also on SaluteMyJob's YouTube channel for those who can't join. If I can, couple of parish notices. The first is that next week's event is being run by Mandy and FireEye. It is an exercise in the morning, which will be particularly relevant for those who wish to or who aspire to become security consultants or into anything to do with client facing. If you know Mandy and FireEye, they are one of the country's leading, or one of the world's leading actually, intelligent analysis companies. And a guy called Tom Scriven, who's an ex-Navy analyst for them, is going to take you through an exercise that they do with their clients to give you a feel of what his job is as a security consultant, as an analyst. And after lunch next Wednesday, he is going to run another of these sessions focused more on employment. And you can talk to him about how on earth he managed to get from the Navy into one of the world's leading organizations. So that is taking place next week. There's some communications, if not out yet, going out about that very soon. So you'll be able to join that. And secondly, as I think most of you know, we're busy working with a range of employers to set up a job shadowing, work placement, or better still, job opportunities for you from the end of the course. Those, given that the timelines have drifted a bit, we're probably looking at the new year for those to start. And I've got a number in the pipeline there, including some in Scotland, and one of which is likely to be in Inverness. So if any of you are looking for Inverness related opportunities, please message me directly and I'll start linking you into that one. Others are spread around all over the place, and as we now know, actually where you are geographically placed in the cyber world is becoming less and less relevant. So those are the parish notices for today. Hattie and I are here, the Abertay guys are here whenever you need us, so please get in touch. And I'm glad that the whole process now of the course content seems to have settled down, but if you've still got issues with that, please do let us know. Right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Jolley. Mike and I have been engaged in quite a long conversation, and he is very supportive of anything that helps ex-military people into their post-military employment. As you'll learn shortly, he's had quite an interesting journey to become the Chief Data Officer, Chief Security Officer for Lowell Group. And I will let him tell you more about that journey, more about Lowell Group and what he does now. When I turn it over to him, please, Shuang, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. As I've stated, my name is Mike Jolley. I'll give you a little bit of a synopsis of my background, and welcome any questions afterwards. And I'll also give you a little bit of an insight in regards to what the transition was from being from military into these scary civilian organizations which come after the military career, and hopefully help with any transitional questions that you have. So my background, I joined the military in 1990. That was January 1990, and I left in 96. So it was only a short career, which included a couple of operational areas, Northern Ireland, Falkland Islands, and we were there, unfortunately, in the first Gulf. I joined, I was in the Royal Signals, and I left in 98, 6 due to injury in Northern Ireland. So that meant I needed to get a role in the civilian world quite quickly. And I used my education and knowledge and skills that I built and capabilities that I built in the military to help with that transition. I was fortunate in one respect that I was employed straight away by 2 Signal Brigade in Corsham, Wiltshire, and spent 2 years there with them, helping them to build the first military network. And then after an element of commercial experience with BT Syntegra, decided that I would take the leap and go and join a civilian company. The first thing I recognized and noticed when I transitioned from being military into a civilian organization was really the level of education and the level of competencies are potentially different. So my first role was to take a very similar role that I'd done in 2 Signal Brigade, Corsham, Wiltshire, which was designing, building and implementing and ensuring the networks become operational for a company called Thurnall SM in Manchester. What I noticed quite quickly through the interview process were a lot of questions that I wasn't familiar with. Competencies, you know, they're obviously elated behaviours. What skills and capabilities can you transition? Also noticing that some of the answers that I gave may be a little bit too structured, and they needed to kind of reduce the pace and then work more in line with a civilian organisation. So that role was there for 2 years, helping them to transition their company from being real-time robotics into a telecommunications organisation. And I led that development and that activity. Now that's coming from quite a junior rank in the military, almost quite quickly into a leadership position, but that transition was fairly simple. And then I became a consultant in the city on cybersecurity and information security, working at certain companies such as ABN AMRO, Credit Suisse, First Boston and Barings Bank. Again, using the skills and capabilities I'd learned in the Royal Signals, they were still relevant and prevalent in organisations, but the commercial aspect wasn't as easy to take a grasp on, especially when you're trying to understand value and worth. Certain areas around budgets and finance, which you have to really adapt and adopt to quite quickly. That consultancy gave me a wide range of skills and capabilities in the world of cyber, and allowed me then to take on my first CISO position, which is the Chief Information Security Officer position at the Cooperative Group. Again, walking into an organisation which has 30 different types of businesses was quite a challenge, and it was quite daunting. But you do rapidly, you're used to taking information in quite quickly, you're used to absorbing that information, and you're used to adapting and adopting to different environments and different styles, definitely in the military. And that type of training really does help in a civilian world. It helps you to adapt and adopt quite quickly in that respect. So I did feel that the training gave me that extra leverage. But again, you just have to probably, the Achilles heel was probably being, again, a little bit too structured, and you need to be a little bit more fluid and a little bit more open. So I learned that quite rapidly at the Cooperative Group, and that was a successful career of 5 years. From the Cooperative Group onto WM Morrison's, which is 140,000 employees, believe it or not, has areas in China, has areas in the US, and it's got quite a geographic representation. So that was a 5-year career there, again, as CISO, but also taking on operational resilience and data protection. So again, using skills and capabilities in operational resilience is very similar. That's making sure a company can survive bumps in the road, being threat focused and be able to manage the risks and treat the risks. A lot of good foundational training there is, again, comes from the military side. And from WM Morrison's into the Yorkshire Building Safety Group, you'll see a theme here. A lot of my career has been about leadership transformation. So that's going into an organization, understanding that they need to change, quickly identifying what that change has to be, and making small but rapid steps, delivering quick, delivering small, and having the tenacity and the energy, which is very, very important, to continue with that change, is something that has really helped me well in my career and did at the YBS Group. At the YBS Group, we managed to win Banking and Financial Services Cybersecurity Team of the Year, and managed to get at the Global Risk Awards the best cybersecurity strategy, which was quite a really good accolade to get, especially when you're dealing with regulators. And now at Lowell, which is across 10 countries, as different cultures you need to adapt and adopt to. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer, very similar story. Started in, the business needed to transform, implemented the cybersecurity capabilities within Lowell. That's the 24/7 operation centers, the threat analytics, the threat intelligence areas, as well as they asked me to take on the role as Chief Data Officer, which is slightly different. That's delivering value out of data and insights for the organization. And now I'm getting to the point of completing the cybersecurity strategy and just at the inaugural stage of the data strategy within Lowell. But again, having that energy, having that tenacity, and understanding that the working day doesn't start at 8 and finish at 5. You know, it can start at 6 a.m. and not really finish till 8 p.m. sometimes. And working with different geographical regions and having that ability to really work under pressure really helps in very large organizations. So I managed to pick up CISO of the Year at the Cybersecurity Awards as a finalist this year. So that has held me in good stance. And I think probably one of the differences when I've recruited ex-military people is simply their work ethic compared with, I'm not saying if you're a civilian you haven't got a good work ethic. There is, it's just a difference. But I would say the work ethic really does help you propel in a lot of civilian companies. So what I've tried to do is give you a brief synopsis of my career and try to throw in a few areas where the military has helped me. But I'm happy to take any questions in regards to any of the transitional aspects from company to company or from military to my first role. Has that helped? Hi, I don't know if my speakers have gone off. I can't actually hear anything.
You're doing well.
Ah, there you go. I can hear you, Andrew. There you go. Are we expecting questions via chat?
Yes, I think I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. So if people have got questions as you go along, if they just put them in the Q&A. Did you hear that?
Hi, I'm really sorry. I'm struggling to hear anybody.
I was just saying, if you can hear me, that
Yes.
if anyone's got questions, to put them into the Q&A, and the team behind the scenes will pop them up to us as and when they appear. So just crack on, Mike, if you're hearing this loud and clear.
Sure. Okay. Well, either that's been a really thrilling introduction and opportunity to ask questions, and there's no questions, or I'm not getting anything through here, Andrew.
Hang on. I'm sure they'll be coming.
Sure.
While we wait, could you just talk a little bit about qualifications from your perspective? I think one of the most regular questions we get is which are the relevant qualifications to get for cyber? These guys are obviously going through a process with Aberdeen University, which would normally be part of a cybersecurity degree. I think further education are doing a certain amount, but most of the questions revolve around the crests and these sorts of commercial qualifications. So would you be kind enough to just talk a little bit about qualifications from your experience and what they should do and what they should expect an employer to do, perhaps specifically?
Sure. Within the world of information and cybersecurity, you can take multiple career paths. Okay. So if your background is technical, or you prefer a technical career path, then the qualifications you should be looking at are ones which represent that path. So CEH, which is Certified Ethical Hacker, is very desirable. If I see that on the CV, I really do think that somebody really understands what they need to do, the skills and capability needed in an organisation. CHFI, which is Certified Hacker Forensic Investigator, that's a really desirable skill. Because that really says, well, okay, I know how people hack, and actually I know how to catch the hackers. So in a lot of companies, they are looking for CHFI, and it's fairly rare qualification to have. And I must admit, if I see that on the CV, I do actually read it a little bit further. I go a little bit further down the list. Also, I would say CISSP is not, which is Certified Information Security Professional, is not as desirable as it used to be, because a lot of the frameworks are changing. So traditionally, information security is based upon confidentiality, integrity, availability, and that's probably quite traditional. And now it's really on the NIST framework, which is Identify, Detect, Protect, React, Respond, Recover. Which follows the ISAC CSX qualification. So I would personally say, if I was looking to take qualification now, it would be the CSX, which is the CSX fundamentals, and that will really give you a good step up in regards to financial services and government organisations, because a lot of them are changing the framework to where they go to more of the NIST framework than they would the traditional CIA framework. So CSX really does provide that kind of good level technical route. The other side of the coin is if you're deciding to go for the governance route into cybersecurity, or the control route, or the risk route, again, you really want to start with CRISC, which is Certified Risk and Information Security Controls. CRISC gives you a really good, sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of echo there. CRISC gives you a really good foundational understanding of the breadth of controls in information security. So information security is not that technically difficult. There are 144 controls you need to really understand, and understand how to implement them, and understand how to measure them. And then particular controls will get you ISO compliant, so the ISO 27001 certified auditor, along with the CRISC, will really give you the leg up in regards to, I want somebody to join my risk team, I want somebody to really help me with my compliance objectives, and an organisation that has signed contracts with other organisations will want them as stock skills and capabilities. So that will give you the route. If you want to go a little bit further into governance, then your CISA, which is Certified Information Systems Auditor. That, and I'll write all these down for you, Andrew, so you can share them. So the CISA component will give you the ability to audit and the ability to work with third parties and check that third parties are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. A lot of companies now are looking to reduce their costs, so they reduce their IT costs, they're looking for reducing their operational costs, so they want to use cloud technology and cloud services. And as we all know, cloud technology and cloud services is just somebody else's data center. So what companies can never do is they can never transfer responsibility to another organization. They have to be confident themselves that they are still accountable if there is a data breach or a particular risk or an issue, despite whether your data is in Microsoft, Amazon, or whether it's a private company you've decided to outsource your services to. So third-party assessments using the CISA qualification is highly desirable. So just to reiterate, going down the technical, CEH, CHFI, onto your CSX, which will really give you that technical leg up. If you're going for the governance, it's your C-risk, it's your ISO auditor, and your CISA component. Now, you will see people go for CISM, Certified Information Security Manager. To be honest, a lot of CISOs know that it's hardly worth the paper it's written on. It doesn't really give you, it kind of says, look, I know a little bit about InfoSec. I know the wide range are kind of the right words to say, but I haven't really got practical implementation knowledge. So CISM is something you can have on your CV, but to be perfectly honest, I don't really see it as a desirable qualification. And I see a lot of people making that mistake and thinking if I take the CISM, I can jump straight into management. That really doesn't tend to work. So when you've got a combination, if you want to go to CISO, which is the Chief Information Security Officer, you will hear people say CISOs do not need to be technical. That is, you could not be further from the truth. CISOs do need to be technical, because when you're dealing with a major incident, when you're dealing with a problem, and you want to give confidence to your CEO and your executive team that they can trust you to keep your eyes on threats, to be able to deal with your auditors, to deal with your third parties, and actually keep the company safe, you do need that technical capability as well. So I would definitely say from a CISO perspective, you need a combination, a mix of both. Now that's the, if I kind of split skills and capabilities, and I'll call it the left brain, as in the typological things you need to do, then you need the management capabilities and the communication and the strategy and the other areas, which is more about shaping, organizing, coordinating. So project management skills are quite desirable, even in security. So if you've got Prince 2, it really tells me that actually I do know how to design a business case. I do know how to document the benefits of that business case. And if you trust me with your money, then I'm going to deliver you the benefits to that particular business case. And that trust is something really important in organizations in regards to that. You're not going to go in there and just spend loads of money and not realize the benefits. So something like a Prince 2 or bringing out your experience in regards to does help, because there is this view, and I'm not saying it's correct, that if you come from the military, you've never dealt with budgets, you've never really dealt with them particular components. It is not necessarily true, but there is that kind of view, and something like your Prince 2 qualification does really start to bridge that gap. So that, and then obviously your traditional leadership type courses you can take, you know, your MBAs or your business type, but they're not really necessary. Just really trust me with your money, trust me with your governance, and trust me with your technology. And you can't go too far wrong in them 3 areas. Sorry that was a little bit long, Andrew, but hopefully that answered the question.
It did, and while you've been doing that, there's a bit going on behind the scenes in terms of the reason you're not seeing the questions is that some of the guys are struggling to access the link. That is a very comprehensive answer to, as I said before, one of the most often asked questions. Can I just back up to what you said about CISP? And I know that the CISM one, I agree with you, is becoming less and less seen as valuable. One of the other comments I hear about CISP is that it's one of these mile wide, inch deep qualifications, in some ways a bit like an MBA or something like that. Is that something that can help people over that sort of first qualification line, and therefore it's a good thing to have on their CV as a general knowledge thing, or is it something that you feel really is a bit like CISM, fast becoming a redundant qualification?
I would put more value on CISP than CISM, and let me explain why. As I mentioned, there are, if you take the ISO framework, or the NIST framework, it really breaks down into round about 144 things that you need to do in InfoSec, and them 144 things has a wide range in it. And what you get in a lot of security teams is you get people who want to work on the things they want to work on. Okay, so some people like to do technical things, some people like to do process things, and some people like to deal with awareness, education, develop strategies, and deal with policies. So, and all of that is bundled into the 144 things you need to do in InfoSec. CISP gives you the ability to just dip into each one of them 144 things and answer the relevant questions associated with them. So if I do see somebody with CISP, I think I may be interviewing them for a technical role or a business information security officer role, or even if they are going to be a deputy CISO. And if they've got that, and even though they've been honest and said, you know, I prefer governance, I prefer technology, then at least you know that they can coach and lead and guide a team who may not be under that particular balance. So CISP is I would say out of 10, it's probably a 6 or a 7, but it isn't one of them critical qualifications where I put a CISM about a 2 or a 3. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And Eamon has got, I'm now seeing the questions. Eamon's got a question. He said, I would be interested in your view on a statement made a little while ago by an SO1 in Army headquarters. He suggested that currently the cyber world is tech heavy in terms of people. Eamon totally understands that techs are required, but he's personally more interested in getting into the leadership strategy side of cyber. And he's got a very good MBA and an MSc in design of information systems. So he understands the weeds without becoming embroiled in the details. So I think he's just trying to chart a path into, dare I say it, the more generalist side of cyber, rather than the chief information security, maybe a chief security officer, rather than maybe that information IT centric nature of it.
Right. Okay. Can I,
make sense?
The context makes sense. Would you mind just pulling out the question? Sorry, Andrew. Just again, so just very clear in my mind.
Totally understand that techs are required, but personally, he is more interested in how he gets into the leadership or strategy side of cyber. Right.
Okay. Okay. I would say again, as I split it into CISA and CRIS. So if you want to drop into the leadership and you want to really sit as an executive level and give them confidence that you can develop a cybersecurity strategy. A cybersecurity strategy starts with what's the risk appetite statement of the business, and so does a security strategy. So you really need to understand and work with stakeholders in regards to what's the limit, what do we accept and what do we not accept as a business. Believe it or not, a lot of business will risk accept taking the level of maturity of cyber and actually take the consequences if there are certain problems associated with non-compliance to GDPR or other areas. So every business accepts risk. And so what I would say is, if you're considering working and operating at that level, there are a few little tips and tricks. For example, you could volunteer to be a governor of a school. Okay, I know that sounds strange. Why would I want to be a governor of a school? Why would I want to take an NED type of activity or role, which you can go into? What that allows you to start doing is talking the language of the board, talking the language of executives. So if you've got that technical understanding in the details of the information, one of the problems you have is how to speak at a board level. Because if I'm speaking at a board level, I'm speaking a completely different language than I'm speaking at a leadership level, that I'm speaking at an operator level and a manager level, okay, within the business. And unfortunately, there are very few playbooks, there are very few areas you can get experience of that. So if you are looking to jump straight in at that level and go really, really high, you really need to try and get that board experience, because the qualifications in the education I've seen doesn't really give you that. And also understand what actually keeps them awake at night, what's on their minds. So it's less about a qualification, it's more about gaining experience. And there are some tips and tricks you can do, like say, governor of a school, you can apply for NED type activities and roles on smaller companies, just so you get to understand the language. What you then need to be thinking about afterwards, and that is how you shape your strategy in regards to security. And there are some great consultancy opportunities. So when you look at the big four, KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, or even smaller consultancy, but like I mentioned right at the beginning, one of my the best experience I had in the world of information security was becoming that consultant, because you've got to think on your feet. And you're thrown into different scenarios and situations, and you get a lot of exposure associated with what's driving the need and the requirements and the why for cyber and information security. And while I went in the consultant, you rapidly have to become on board. So you get to read these papers, you get to understand the language, and you get to really get insight, to the operate. So if I was going military, wanting to go into leadership, I would consider the consultancy route to really get that exposure. And KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, EY, they have excellent training facilities which help you with that consultancy. And I would consider volunteering again for school governor, or even taking a bit of a lower pay at an NED type role and activity. And they will give you that propel, an accelerator almost, into that leadership position. And they will also, when you're in interviews, when you're being interviewed by a CEO, it's completely different to being interviewed by a manager or a particular leader in an organization. So there's no real kind of skill-based kind of qualification in there. It's really getting that consultancy and that engagement experience. Does that help, Andrew? I've answered the question in the right way.
Yeah, I think so. Eamon, if you've got a follow up to that, please ask it. I was also going to suggest non-executive director roles, particularly in smaller companies, which you can probably get based on your military credentials anyway. And then if you do some non-exec director training, there's quite a lot of that around now, then whether it's a governor of a school or similar things, that you are engaged at board level. But to go back to Mike's point earlier, if I may, the TalkTalk saga and the now famous Dido Harding, who's having the same effect on track and trace. I listened to her interview with John Humphreys on Radio 4 when that was all unfolding, and she had made an executive decision to say that they'd had a data breach, but she had no concept of what that meant, nor could she describe what data had been lost, and she was laid bare to the nation at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. So there is a level, and I think all of us the more we learn about cyber, the more I think we accept the fact that there is a level of technical knowledge. But it depends on the makeup of the company, what the company does, how much it outsources. Because if it's an outsourcer, as Mike said earlier, there's a lot of work being done in the cloud. So actually, you're managing a supplier is probably a more important skill, and then you get them in to do the technical stuff. I don't know whether, Mike, you would agree, or whether I'm talking nonsense.
No, you're absolutely right in regards to I think it's the old adage: you never ask somebody to do something that you don't know how to do it yourself. And what I mean by that, you may outsource technical aspects of it, but if you're ever in a situation, whether it's a breach or whether it's with the board or whether it's having to present to regulators how comfortable and safe you are, to your point in regards to that interview, you need to get your data points, you need your information points before. Prior preparation prevents, you know the rest of it, in regards to them particular components. So you do need to understand what's going on, and you do need to understand the relevant information you need to gather in preparation for whatever you're going to be doing. And that's where you need the technical knowledge. And not really in regards to how do I configure this firewall, how do I set my access control list. You just need to understand access control lists need to be in there. And actually, I need a firewall because it protects from this threat, and here's why. So yeah, that is probably one of the most famous interviews that could not have gone any worse. And then the repercussions were, and there's been a lot of companies who have had breaches. BA recently, £20 million fine by the ICO, and they just held their hands up, admitted, knew exactly all the data points and information points they needed to do in preparation, and the company will expect you to coach them through that scenario as a leader in information security and cyber security.
Thanks very much. Can we change tack? Ray's asking, what is your most valuable skill, military skill, to a civilian employer, in your view?
It's one that I would say okay, I've got two ways of answering this, okay. What do I privately know as my the skill I learned the best in the military, what's really helped me the most in the civilian world, and what you don't admit to because companies don't like you admitting to it. Okay, so it is structure. It is having attention to detail. It is test, execute before you actually rehearse things. You know, you've been on exercise. How many rounds do you fire before you hit the target properly in regards to what you're doing? How many times you run your BFT, if they are BFTs now? I don't know what they are nowadays. You know, you practice and practice and practice. The reason why a lot of companies don't like to hear that is because they see, if you're going to practice, you're going to cost me money. If you're going to be structured, that means you're not going to be a collaborative team player. And other particular areas, but actually delivering on your promises and spending, when everybody goes home, you're still reading the papers, you're still actually testing things and checking things, is one of the most valuable skills I would say I learned in the military, compared with what a lot of my civilian counterparts probably don't bring along with them. Now, I could have turned around and said it's a particular training or a course, what you've done in the signals, but I would say that privately is probably one of the biggest assets that I've managed to get.
So if you were if you asked that question at interview, what would you say?
If I was asked the question in regards to what's the most valuable transferable asset in that, it would be quickly to analyze, assess situations, understand what we need to do in a swift and sure manner, and you can rely on me from an accountability point of view to take ownership of what I need to do and deliver it. That's how I would answer it into an interview.
Yeah. and under pressure, I would add to that one as well. Absolutely. I notice you have to get the Swift Insure in there. Well done.
Well,
Yeah,
I
that's
thought I
good.
put Certecito in there. There you go. I just thought I'd throw that one in.
Okay. Eamon, thanks you for that advice. He's very happy with that. One more is which roles within maybe IT or the digital world, perhaps, is the best way of asking, are most appropriate for military people in your view?
It's really the world digital is quite interesting. Because I do specialize in digital transformation. When I go into a company, I'm looking, are you on the cusp of digital transformation and why? Digital means lots of different things in lots of different companies. To some, it means a mobile app. Some, it means going on the web. Others, it means making the company into a digital enabled organization, which is probably 9 times out of 10 what somebody's asking you when you go into an organization. And what that means, it means not taking what they call big, chunky, huge projects, which spend 3 to 4 months assessing and analysing and working out the business case, then structuring in a particular way and then delivering it in a waterfall manner. That's not what they're looking for. Digital basically means, how can I change my website very quickly? So how do I organize my teams into a way to take small requirements, create stories and deliver little and often? And they do that in what's called a DevOps type of way, development and operations type of way. So what that basically says, it says, well, how do you get teams to work together on small chunks and deliver often and quickly? And to be able to do that is a skill and capability in what's called DevOps and what's called a V model type. So that's there are 2 areas that I'd probably recommend if you're looking for digital. Well, you could say Devsecops are 2 areas that I'd recommend that you research upon and look at getting skills in. Because when you go into an organization and you understand the DevOps and the Devsecops mentality and methodology, then you can realize how you can use your training to actually work in that manner. So you know, and digital also means for companies automation. So every company you go into has technical debt, process debt, and people debt. So what do I mean by that? Is a lot of companies will turn around and say, we need to move quickly. We just need to get on with it. We just need to deliver. Forget fixing the legacy, just deliver. And what happens in there is behind them, they leave a complete mess behind them. So they end up with legacy systems, inefficient processes, technology that you don't touch because it'll be broken. And what they want to do is they say, well, we want to make it more efficient, so we'll throw automation at it, robotics. And all automation basically means putting a repeatable task in. Instead of a human doing it, you write it in code. But again, if you go into an organization and say, I'm qualified in robotics, I'm qualified in automation, and you don't talk about how you tackle technical debt, process debt, and people debt, which has been left behind through either merger and acquisition or changes that have had to just been in there because a client wants it, a company might not actually look at you as a digital transformation, somebody who can do digital transformation. So there's automation, there is the DevOps type route, which you need to consider, and then there's the agile type Scrum project methodology, what you need to also consider again in training, which is slightly different to Prince 2. So to summarize it, when companies say they want to move digital, it means they want to deliver small chunks quickly. And that's been my experience in pretty much every organization I've been over the last 20 years.
Okay, thanks, Mike. What about cyber specifically then? Are there any particular roles there that you'd suggest these guys go for?
Sure. Okay. Every digital environment requires security. I mentioned Devsecops. Okay. So Devsecops is basically how teams pull together in what they call a scrum. Okay. So that when you're there as a cybersecurity representative, you're there to understand the requirements of what they're looking to do into the change, and you're there to define what they need to do from a security point of view, provide them help in what they need to do, and test and check that they've delivered the solution. So define, consult, and check. That's the way I explain it to people. So define comes from your governance, it comes from your C-risk, it comes from your CSER, it's the controls, it's the requirements you need from security. Consult comes through experience. Experience how to change them requirements into solutions. One thing we've not talked about is testing. Security testing, penetration testing. So security testing isn't penetration testing anymore. It's a combination. It's a combination of the controls that need to be tested regards to any particular change. So that will be controls which are in your software development lifecycle, your SDLC. So you will need to understand the control framework associated with software development. Testing also includes OAT, operational acceptance testing, which you need to be, and this is where I'd recommend, if you're going to pick up a course, look at a QA framework like the V model, because that's really good at explaining what you need to do there. So testing needs to include OAT, and then testing needs to contain UAT. So it's great pen testing an application or pen testing change, which say a hacker can get in there, but what about internal fraud? A lot of companies are actually, believe it or not, 5 to 10% of companies have 5 to 10% of employees in an organization, on average, will commit some type of internal fraud within their organization, whether that's not putting in expenses and claiming too much for their expenses, whether that's using the systems or services inappropriately, or whether that's actually, believe it or not, paying invoices into their own bank account. So that user acceptance testing in regards to using your knowledge, that's your CHFI, Certified Hacker Forensic Investigator, and defining the requirements in that way is something that they are looking in the digital world. So that's what we call DevSecOps. So it's define, consult, and check. Does that help in that? And again, what I'm probably better off doing, Andrew, is sending you a skills matrix that I prepared before. And then on that skills matrix, it is split into these particular columns. So if you're looking to go to this career path, here are the skills and capabilities you need. Okay,
that'd be really helpful. Thank you very much. Question around what, if any, programming languages are useful to know, and at what level for cybersecurity?
Okay, so times are changing in regards to this. If I was starting off now, it would be all around Python. And why? Okay, so one of the biggest problems in cybersecurity isn't necessarily how you protect, it's how you assess the level of protection you've got using data analytics and information analytics to give you confidence that you've got the data points to tell you you're safe. So I mentioned the 144 controls that you need to protect in information security. A subsection of them will be key controls, really, really important things that you need to implement. So how do you measure that they're working effectively? Well, you need data, you need information. And a lot of data and information will come from technology or will come from processes. And that data and information becomes into a central analytics type of solution. That could be SIEM, which is a log system. But what companies are looking for more now is security orchestration, automation, and response. Not about logging, but how do we deal with that information and then data points, and how do we react and respond to them? Python is a really, really powerful tool for data analytics, to go into that data and information and tell you whether I've got indicators of compromise, behavioral indicators of compromise, or I just want to develop the graphs and the fancy data and MI, which tells me that I'm confident my security controls are operating effectively. Python is also a very powerful tool for pen testing. So if you want to test something, if you want to check something, it's also a very powerful tool for discovering what you need to do on your network. So for me personally, it would be Python and fundamentally understanding Unix controls and commands and scripting in Unix. If you've got them two areas of language and skills, then you can't go too far wrong. I could throw in VB scripts and Java and others, but they're kind of legacy, and Python is more the modern language.
Thanks, Mike. And for those of you who haven't found it already, on the Skills Build platform that you should all have access to, there are a number of Python courses, including a good Python basics course, which I would also recommend as well. And if you haven't got access to Skills Build, then please get in touch with us and we'll make sure that you have. But I think everyone on the call should have access to that. So just go into when you first log in, what do you want to learn about today, and type in Python, and that will offer the various opportunities you've got there. We've got one last question for you, which is going back to the subject of risk. How much risk management is there from companies, and are you, as the CISO and CDO, the risk holder?
Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, so the first one, how much is orientated around risk? If you're in financial services, you need to really fully understand the risk frameworks, and you need to understand and speak the language of risk management. So that's everything from the risk appetite statement to the key risk indicators to the risk frameworks. And you also need to have general knowledge of other risk areas other than cyber, because security risk tends to sit in other risk areas. Operational risk, well, they kind of make sense that if you have a cybersecurity breach, your IT systems go down, you've got an operational risk that will materialize. Then you need to understand information risk. So information risk really in start of how we're going to protect the data, are we using it appropriately, are there any security breaches that can affect the data integrity? So that's information risk and operational risk. You need to understand conduct risk. So conduct risk is really about how you're treating people fairly. So if you were to expose employee information or customer information, you're not treating them fairly. If you're not treating them fairly and that risk exposes, it can leave the company in really hot water. So then you need to really understand financial risk as well. So why financial? Well, if you have a cybersecurity breach, it's going to potentially be a fine, there's going to be remediation costs, there's going to be other risks that can materialize from a finance point of view. And when companies in financial services are assessing their financial risk, every year, at least once a year, they will look at the potential risk that can materialize. And the regulators expect them to actually take that capital, what they could normally invest into the business, and actually put it to one side and not allowed to spend it. In fact, they have to put it into the Bank of England, which is a 0.001% interest rate right now. So in other words, it's money they don't want to put to one side, but they're regulatory obliged to do it. So working for the chief risk officer and integrating into the risk management function is absolutely essential in financial services, and that's where your most money is probably going to come from if you pick a sector. I could mention credit risk and other risk areas, but they're the main risk areas. So really be fluent in risk management. Also, every company you go in, there'll be a level of auditing. Somebody's going to come into you and audit you in regards to whatever you're doing, whether you're technical, whether you're governance, or whether you're a CISO. And 9 times out of 10, an auditor is paid to find problems and really expose your problems, which is fine. But it's actually hard for ex-military people to take criticism to that particular level. And if you understand risk management, and when these audit reports come in, and you can talk the language of okay, thank you for finding that particular problem, but what risk will materialize through the exposure of that particular problem? Then it actually helps you frame your response to them audits in a much better way. So that's a very good skill to have from that perspective. So if you're working as a CISO level, you will always be asked to go and sit on the audit and risk committee or present to them what the risks of the organizations are, and you are the expert in designing the strategy and basically keeping that risk from materializing. So it's critically important. Now, do I own that risk? I'll take that second part of the question. Technically, no, unless you're in financial services. So in financial services, which I am in Lowell, you have to sign up to SMCR, which is Senior Management, it's SMR now, Senior Management Regime, which basically means I'm personally liable if there is a cybersecurity breach, and I'm not allowed to take insurance out against that liability. So actually, I'm not allowed to take executive insurance out or directorship insurance out. So what happens if that risk materializes? So if I've gone into a board and told them everything's perfect and everything's fine, then a risk materializes, I'm personally liable. If I got in and said your controls aren't effective and you need to do X, Y, and Z, and they don't listen to me, then that's their risk. I've transferred that risk. So, you have to be very careful in telling them everything looks fine, and really be very, if you are going to tell them everything's fine, be very extremely confident that you are 100% safe, or make sure that you frame it so the board can decide to either treat the risk by giving you extra funding, or they accept the risk. Now, obviously, in the world of cyber, getting risk management is the trick to your business case. I hear so many CISOs say, nobody listens to me, nobody will give me any money. Well, that's because they're not using risk management effectively. As long as you've articulated your business case in a risk way, I've not come across a board that will not give you funding to stop them risk materializing. But also, if you over-engineer that threat and tell them the whole world's going to collapse on each other, if you don't give them money, they won't believe you. So you have to be very balanced in your approach to risk management. So if you go work in retail, unless you're the data protection officer, you're not personally reliable. And if you work in manufacturing, you're not personally liable. The board is personally liable, and the non-executive directors and the directors are. So if you're a CISO at a director level, you may be. If not, it's not your neck on the line. Does that answer the question?
It does, and also exposes a lot of the, you talking earlier about the language you use at board level, and you're showing exactly there what that means in terms of risk and how you need to brief boards using different language, but make it very clear to them in terms of the business and the impact of the business, what otherwise might sound like a very technical risk. But that's probably a whole course in itself. I think, unless you've got any other last comments, Mike will bring this to a close spot on 16:30. It must be time for tea and toast. So have you got anything else by words of advice or guidance to the troops before you sign off?
Don't hesitate in taking a deputy position and being coached and mentored by existing CISOs or existing security management. It will only be 12 months of your life, but it will be really worth it in building the foundations. That would be my probably last bit of advice.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much indeed, and thanks to everyone for joining the webinar this afternoon. As I say, it will be recorded, so those gems that Mike has left will be there for you to see. But as he said, we will also write this down, and I think I might add a few things that I've heard from others into that matrix as well, so that we're giving good advice, particularly around the qualifications piece. The only final comment I would make on that is that lots of employers now are saying that actually what you get out of, let's say it's a CREST certification, doesn't accurately reflect the job that people are doing on the ground, and therefore they prefer to train, and they will put you through the qualification that is most relevant to them as a company. And bear in mind, particularly in financial services, that when a company is contracted, there will be written into the agreement the qualifications that an individual consultant might have, and they will not be able to deploy that consultant until they have got those qualifications. Therefore, you need to make sure you're doing the right one for that company, otherwise it's of no value to them. What I'm really saying there is that a lot of companies will A, train you, and B, pay for the qualifications. You don't necessarily have to have those before you join. And what everybody says to me is they're after attitude, and indeed in your case, the military skills and experience that you bring. I recognise that there's a CV high jump bar to get over, and therefore you need to have a level of training and certification or qualification as part of that process. But I guess all things in moderation. You've got other things to bring to the party. So Mike, that's been a really useful session. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks everyone for joining, and we will look forward to seeing you next week for the exercise with Mandip Farai. Thanks you all very much indeed. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.